Welcome back to part 2 of Understanding Cannabinoids, a practical therapeutic focus. In part 1, we talked a little bit about cannabinoids and the different CB1 and CB2 receptors and how they influence the body and brain. In this part 2, we're going to go into a little bit more detail, and we're going to start by talking about glutamate receptors. So there's very specific stimulations that happen from cannabidiol and different cannabinoids, one of which is an increase of anandamide in the brain. Anandamide is a neurotransmitter, and it is responsible for relaxation and bliss. It goes up in the brain when we meditate. For those that aren't aware, when we meditate, cortisol also goes down in the brain, and cortisol is a chemical that you do not want too much of. So look up the benefits of meditation. They are many and far-reaching. We recommend everyone begin some type of meditation protocol along with their CBD. Chocolate. When we eat chocolate, anandamide is increased in the brain, and this neurotransmitter is responsible for a lot of different things. So all neurotransmitters are used within the body, and then they break down. And there are other chemical reactions that break down different neurotransmitters. Well, CBD helps to block FAAH, which is referred to as a fatty acid amide hydrolase. So when we take CBD, we get this increase of anandamide in the brain, we get an influx of the glutamate receptors stimulation, and then we get the fatty acid amide hydrolase being blocked, the FAAH, and that enzyme breaks down anandamide. So if we're preventing the anandamide from breaking down, and we're getting this pooling up or the synthesis of 2-AG, which is 2-arachidonoglycerol, as well as the anandamide, this is one of the main reasons why when you take CBD, you feel very good from it, and it helps to detoxify the brain. So one of the main causes of inflammation, both in the body and in the brain, are different types of materials that we consume, as well as different VOCs that we're exposed to. Throughout the autonomic system, dairy, cheese, and processed meats increases inflammation. So if there's anything that you want to cut out of your diet to help you if you're dealing with fibromyalgia and other issues, chronic issues within the body, try cutting out dairy and cheese and processed meats for a while and see how your body reacts. This inflammation doesn't just take place in the body, it takes place in the brain as well. And it is caused by many factors, one of which is a glutamate excitotoxicity. Now this doesn't mean that there's too much glutamate being released into the brain. It just means that the receptor is hyperactive. So some of the concentrations of the CB receptors in the brain, specifically CB1 receptors, the basal ganglia, which is responsible for movement, cerebral cortex, which is responsible for thinking and higher cognitive functions, the hypothalamus, responsible for appetite, the cerebellum, movement, and onward, as you can see. So heavily concentrated in the brain, which is why we get such relief from a lot of different neurological conditions. Now, if we break down the cell in the brain, we have this microglia in the cell of the brain. It is an immune cell, and it is not supposed to release pro-inflammatory compounds, but certain things get into the brain from living on this planet Earth and begin to signal it to release these pro-inflammatory cytokines. Things like VOCs, cleaning supplies, cleaning products, off-gassing that comes out of cushions and brand new cars and mattresses, dishwashing liquid pods. There's a whole bunch of different things we're exposed to throughout the day that help to increase this inflammation. Pesticides like glyphosate and paraquat and rotenone have been known to cause incredible inflammation in the brain. Mold toxins as well, Lyme, as well as EMF stress. No one's really talking about EMF stress, but this is a huge topic, folks, because 5G is getting ready to roll out, and it is going to greatly affect the human body once that starts to roll out. So think twice before you want faster and faster internet speeds. So if we look at the cell in the brain, this neuroinflammatory trigger comes from a couple of different parts. It's horribly complicated, and I confess I don't know everything about it, but there are some key things that we are aware of, and the biologist's view of it looks like this. We have on the left here an inflammatory trigger, We have this cytokine, or this toxin, that gets into the glia of the cell, and it activates the macrophage. And it comes into the cell, and it starts to attack the nerve cell, and then the nerve cell says, hey, I don't really like this. I'm going to release some chemicals myself to try to fight back. And then we get this little circle wheel of neurotoxicity happening, and ultimately we get brain stress, right? We get issues within the brain. So these pro-inflammatory cytokines are any toxin that disrupts the NMDA receptor. That is the glutamate receptor we were just talking about. The NMDA receptor is the glutamate receptor. And CBD helps to reduce this hyperexcitation in the neurological field. There's something else that occurs in the brain through our normal immune system functions called superoxide dismutase. And this is an enzyme that will catalyze, or dismutation, creates this dismutation or blocking, partitioning of the superoxide molecule, which is oxygen 2 to the negative. Okay, and that becomes a radical. Okay, now CBD in the brain helps to convert that to a typical oxygen molecule, or in some cases it may even convert it to a hydrogen peroxide, an H2O2, which, as we know, is very cleansing to the body. Thus, superoxide dismutase is an important antioxidant, and it's good in defense of all living cells exposed to oxygen. It also helps to break down harmful molecules that can prevent damage to tissues in the brain. So these are all some of the chemical reactions happening in the brain when we take CBD. Some of the additional changes: CBD turns up a number of genes that make glutathione. The family of glutathione does a lot. It increases reactive oxygen species, or antioxidants, into the body and the brain. It's responsible for detoxification, which is why CBD has been known to remove toxins from the brain, and it also assists with protein repair. So it's going to turn down genes that are pro-inflammatory, okay, sealing up the leaky blood-brain barrier. This blood-brain barrier we're talking about is a filtering mechanism of capillaries that carry blood to the brain and the spinal cord. And it's supposed to block the passage of certain substances. But sometimes, when certain toxins get into the body and brain, they thin out. These walls of the cells thin out, and some of those toxins get into the body and into the brain. These additional neuromodulatory activities create neuroinflammation. Okay, and they are from these toxins, as well as some prescription medications can create different toxicity levels in the brain, such as anxiety. We've heard people talk about brain fog quite frequently. People that have come into the store having had some type of chemotherapy or radiation for cancer, and they often talk about brain fog, and as well as migraines. CBD helps to reduce that inflammation, thus helps to create some benefit to those issues. Now, gene transcription modification is a big word, but basically what it does is it's going to help upregulate NRF2. If you look up NRF2 and do a little research on it, okay, this does a great job at assisting the immune system. It's a big part of the immune system. We won't go into too much detail here. So we basically use CBD for free radical control. We use it for neurological detoxification, and yes, it does help to remove toxins from the brain. So this neurological inflammation, when these releases of inflammatory cytokines get into the brain, like beta amyloid plaques, and causing different types of brain infections, we want to keep the organelles in our brain healthy. These organelles in our brain are made of membranes. Remember earlier in part 1 we were talking about how important it is to have healthy cells and healthy membranes by eating properly, eating lots of good quality materials and getting good quality foods into our body. Well, these organelles help to charge the membrane. It's basically like a capacitor, because as we said in part 1, the body is both chemical and electrical. Now, while CBD does influence a lot of chemical reactions, we're not aware of any electrical stimulations at this point. But electrical stimulations help to drive enzymatic reactions in the body, which is vital to healthy metabolic functions. So, the mitochondria in our cells receives food from our body, and then it in turn creates energy. This is referred to as ATP, okay? And ATP is responsible for converting food into energy. And this electron transport chain within the cells is very effective in keeping us healthy. When you do not have enough electrical charge within your cells, they don't function properly. This is one thing we are unaware of CBD assisting in yet. But a lot of people have to understand that if you don't do the right things in life to keep your cells charged, just the balance between sodium and potassium is huge. You do need salt in your body to help with this charge. You need to get into moving water like streams and the ocean. It helps to recharge the body. There's a lot of physicians out there talking now about grounding and earthing, which is a way to increase the charge within the cells. So, if you are missing charge within the cells, instead of making immune system repair, your body's making free radicals. We have people that come into the store every day saying, I'm eating really well, I don't know why I still have all this pain. Well, you need to think about maybe your cells are not charged enough. They're not getting enough electron transport into the cell to charge it, this ATP, so to speak. And that can lead to many things like chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, and just a worn out, foggy system. And the old way of treating this was phospholipid choline therapy. Some people believe in it, and other doctors say it doesn't do anything. Ultimately, if you can get outside into the fresh air and be in nature and touch the earth with your bare feet, we all wear sneakers nowadays which are insulating us from the charge of the earth, and we want to try to increase the electrical charge within the body. So let's talk for a moment about molecular chaperones. They just basically help remove toxins from the body. There are many of them that we can get our hands on. Polyphenolic antioxidants, plants with sulforaphane in them, things like broccoli and garlic and green onions and green tea, and they help to produce ozone within the body, very much like peroxide and baking soda. Anyone that's on some type of a cancer protocol, whether it is typical chemotherapy or radiation, or you're looking at alternative methods of natural healing properties, peroxide and baking soda are very effective, so look that up. So, we've discussed earlier that CBD is not psychoactive like THC, but it is going to make you feel good, as we discussed in the beginning of this presentation. CBD does not act on the same pathways as THC, but in fact, when you take CBD, if you are doing a cannabis protocol for any of your medical benefits, if you get too high from too much THC, perhaps by accident, if you take some CBD, it will help to reduce that effect. Okay? And everyone always asks, is CBD safe? Lots of different journals. There's over 1,800 peer-reviewed studies now talking about how well-tolerated CBD, no known side effects to date, and very well tolerated by most people at different dosages. Different medical benefits: anti-anemic, anti-convulsant, antipsychotic, anti-inflammatory. It's an antioxidant. Anti-tumor, helps to reduce tumor growth and necrosis. So we talked a moment ago about cannabis. If you are using cannabis in your protocols and you want to reduce the effects of the psychotropic feeling of THC in the brain, and you can take CBD to just help to split that role, and it will actually reduce the high that you experience. The CBD we sell here in the store, we always recommend initial doses for individuals with anxiety, and then a little higher dose typically starts to focus on pain reduction, and very high dosages can be used as sleep aids. And we can finish with some of the other benefits that people have experienced with using CBD. And if you have any questions, go ahead and feel free to comment, or check out the website at the store here, which is azWHOLEistic.com. Thanks so much for watching.